It was the end, but I also knew Morrison was right about one thing. There were more secrets to uncover. And now that we had survived the first part of the truth, we would need the courage to face the rest of our family's story. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Sheriff Tom Harrison's office in Denver, with Helena by my side. Her arm was still in a sling, but the doctors said she would make a full recovery. Morrison was in prison awaiting trial for attempted murder and fraud, while Reed had made a deal to testify against him in exchange for a reduced sentence. But there were still unanswered questions, and Morrison's final words continued to haunt me. "You have no idea about the secrets Roberto kept, about what your mother really did, Sheriff Harrison," I said. "We know there's more to the story." Morrison mentioned other secrets about our mother. The sheriff sighed and opened a thick folder on his desk. "Yes, well, the investigation has revealed some ... complication. After we arrested Morrison, we gained full access to Roberto Marquez's personal files. He pulled out a series of photographs and documents. It seems Roberto wasn't just romantically obsessed with your mother. He believed she had stolen something from him before she ran away in 1955. Stolen what? Documents. Specifically, evidence that the main Marquez family mine was being operated with child labor and criminally negligent safety practice. At the time, this could have destroyed the company and sent several family members to prison. I felt my stomach clench. Did our mother know about this? She knew more than that. According to the records we found, she was the one who discovered the violation. She worked secretly for months to document everything, photographing working conditions, collecting testimony from workers. Helena leaned forward. And then what? Did she blackmail the family? Not exactly blackmail, the sheriff said. It seems she first tried to convince Roberto and her father Vicente to voluntarily correct the violation. When they refused, she threatened them with public exposure. Hence, the family feud, I murmured. Exactly. Vicente tried to disown her, to prevent her from taking the evidence to the authorities. Roberto tried a different approach. He offered to marry her, promising to reform the mine's operations if she kept silent. The photo we had found of our mother with Roberto suddenly made more sense. It wasn't a romance. It was a negotiation. But she didn't accept. For a while, she did. For almost a year, in 1954, she tried to work with Roberto to implement changes. But when it became clear he was just procrastinating, that he never had a real intention to change, she fled. I finished. Taking all the evidence with her, Roberto spent the rest of his life trying to find her, not out of love, but because he needed those documents back. And our mother, did she never expose the violation? The sheriff hesitated. That's where it gets complicated. It seems she tried, but the Marquez family had powerful connections. Politicians, judges, law enforcement officials. Your mother's evidence was ... discouraged. Discouraged how? Threats. First against her, then against the two of you when you were born. The Marquez family made it clear that if she ever tried to expose their operation, you would pay the price. I felt a wave of nausea. Our mother had lived for decades knowing about terrible crimes, wanting to do the right thing, but prevented by the threat against her daughters.
Just to make sure you keep getting our stories, subscribe to the channel, give this one a like too, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from.
So she kept silent to protect us, Helena whispered, and lived with that guilt for the rest of her life, I added. The sheriff pulled out another document. There's more. We found a letter your mother wrote shortly before she... Apparently, she had made arrangements for the evidence to be delivered to federal authorities after her death. What evidence? I thought Roberto was looking for copies. Your mother was smarter than anyone realized. She kept the originals hidden but made multiple copies and hid them in different locations. I felt my breathing quicken, including the cabin. Exactly. Roberto's whole scheme to lure you there wasn't just about the money. He hoped you would find where your mother had hidden the evidence so he could finally destroy it. But Morrison didn't know that, Helena said. He thought it was just about the inheritance. Morrison was greedy, but not particularly intelligent. Roberto never told him the real reasons for wanting to lure you to the property. So where is the evidence now? The sheriff smiled for the first time since the conversation began. The FBI has it. Apparently, your mother was more meticulous than we imagined. She not only documented the Marquez mine's violations, but also the subsequent cover-up, including the names of corrupt officials and politicians who were paid to keep quiet. Even after all these years, some of the crimes have no statute of limitation, especially those involving worker and government corruption. Well, let's just say there are some very nervous people in Washington and Denver right now. I leafed through the documents the sheriff had shown us. Decades of secrets, lies, and corruption, all centered around a young woman who tried to do the right thing and found herself trapped between her conscience and the safety of her family. There's one more thing, the sheriff said, pulling out a sealed envelope. Your mother left this. It was only to be delivered if the evidence ever came to light. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. It was a handwritten letter, in our mother's familiar script. My dearest Clara and Helena, I read aloud. If you are reading this, it means the secrets I carried my whole life have finally been revealed. I know you must be confused and perhaps even angry with me for having kept so much hidden. I paused, feeling tears welling in my eyes. Helena took my hand, encouraging me to continue. When I was young, I thought doing the right thing would be simple. I saw injustice and wanted to correct it. I didn't understand then the personal cost of standing up to powerful. When you were born, that cost became impossible. Every day of my life, I carried the guilt of knowing about the Marquez family's crimes and not being able to do anything about it. Men died in those mines, fathers, sons, and I kept silent to protect you. Helena sobbed softly. Mom, ... I continued reading. Roberto wasn't a bad man when he was young, just weak. He genuinely loved me, and for a while, I thought I could change him. But the family's money and power ultimately proved stronger than his love for me. I hope you can forgive me for the lies I told, for the secrets I kept. Everything I did was to protect you. If this evidence ever sees the light of day, know that it was my greatest wish all these years. The letter was signed simply, with all my love, Mom. But there was a postscript. P.S. The locket in the safe belonged to my grandmother. She once told me that each generation of women in our family carries the burden of righting the wrongs of the previous generation. Now it's up to you to decide what to do with that responsibility. We folded the letter in silence, processing everything we had discovered. Our mother was not the simple, reserved woman we thought we knew. She had been a silent hero, carrying an impossible burden to keep us safe. So, Helena said finally, what do we do now? With the inheritance, with the evidence, with everything? It was a good question. Technically, we were now the rightful heirs to a fortune built on suffering and blood. The life insurance money was ours by legal right. But morally, ... I think I know what our mother would want us to do, I said. Helena nodded. The families of the workers who died, the descendants of the people who suffered. We can use the money to compensate the victim, I agreed. Establish a fund. Ensure the families get the justice our mother couldn't give them in her lifetime. Sheriff Harrison smiled again. You know, that will mean giving up millions of dollars. Money that should never have existed, Helena said. If it was built on exploitation and death, then giving it back is the only right thing to do. And the property, the cabin, I thought about it. The cabin where it had all started, where Roberto had spent his final years obsessed with the past, where Helena and I had finally discovered the truth about our family. We'll donate it to, I decided. Maybe it can be turned into a memorial or a center for workers' rights organization. In the weeks that followed, Helena and I worked with lawyers and civil rights groups to establish the Elena Marquez Foundation, dedicated to helping families of exploited workers and exposing unjust labor practices. All the inheritance money went to the foundation, as did the property. We were not the only beneficiaries of our decision. Several families whose ancestors had died in the mines received compensation. Corrupt politicians were exposed, and some were even prosecuted. The story came to light, finally giving a voice to the men who had died decades. Morrison was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Reed received 5 years with probation. Henry Walsh, the man who had saved us that terrible night, became the foundation's first director. He knew the local history better than anyone and had a genuine passion for justice. But perhaps the most important change was in the relationship between Helena and me. Facing danger together, uncovering our family's dark secrets, and deciding to do the right thing despite the personal cost, united us in a way I thought would never be possible again. Do you think we made the right choice? Helena asked one afternoon as we visited the cabin, now being converted into the Elena Marquez Memorial Center. I looked out at the mountain landscape, thinking about our mother, about Roberto, about all the people whose lives had been affected by the events of decades past. I think we made the only choice we could live with in peace, I replied, and I think Mom would be proud. Helena smiled, the first time I'd seen her truly happy in years. She would. We finally managed to right the wrongs of the previous generation, and maybe broke the cycle for future generations. As we walked back to our car, I could have sworn I felt a gentle presence, as if our mother was finally at peace. The secrets had been revealed, justice had been done, and her family was finally united again. The snow was falling softly as we left the property for the last time, but I didn't feel sadness. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Hope that sometimes the truth really does win, that justice can be delayed but still meaningful, and that even the darkest secrets can eventually give way to light. As we drove down the mountain, Helena took my hand, a simple gesture that symbolized everything we had recovered. We were sisters again, united not just by blood, but by the conscious choice to do what was right, no matter the cost. The road ahead disappeared into the falling snow, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what might be waiting. We had faced the ghosts of the past and emerged stronger. Whatever the future held, we would face it together. And in the suitcase in the back seat, carefully wrapped, was our great-grandmother's locket, no longer a symbol of buried secrets, but a reminder that each generation has the power to do better than the last. The chain had been broken, and now it was up to us to write a new story for the Santos family. The snow continued to fall, covering our tracks and erasing the last traces of our presence on the property. But the changes we had set in motion would last much longer than our time in those mountains. The truth, finally revealed, would follow its own path into the world, bringing justice to those who had waited so long for it. And Helena and we would move forward, not just as heirs to a blood-stained fortune, but as guardians of a new family tradition, a tradition of courage, truth, and the determination to always do the right thing, no matter how difficult the path. Then this will become much more complicated for the two of you. The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Helena instinctively moved closer to me, and I could feel her hand trembling as she gripped my arm. "Who are you really?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "That doesn't matter," Morrison replied. "What matters is that you understand your situation. The Marquez inheritance doesn't belong to you. It never did. The will says otherwise," Helena retorted, and I immediately regretted her admitting that we had found the document. The other man laughed, an unpleasant sound. "The will. Do you really think a forged document has any legal value?" "Forged," I repeated. "Roberto Marquez died in a questionable mental state," Morrison explained. "Advanced Alzheimer's. Any will dated from the last 5 years of his life can be easily challenged in court." "Then why haven't you done it?" Helena asked. "Because we needed you to come here voluntarily. We needed you to find the documents, to know about the inheritance, so you could properly renounce it." "And what if we don't want to renounce it?" Morrison pulled a folded paper from the inner pocket of his coat. "Then you would be forcing our hand. This is a search and seizure warrant, authorizing us to remove any item from the property that may be pertinent to the Marquez estate." I took the paper and examined it. It looked official, with appropriate stamps and signatures, but something about it bothered me. "This doesn't give you the right to threaten us," I said. "Threaten?" Morrison seemed genuinely surprised. "Who's threatening whom? You are on private property without proper legal authorization. Technically, you're trespassers, but you gave us the..." "No, we didn't. You received the key, but not from us." Helena and I exchanged a look. If they hadn't given us the key, who had? "Look," Morrison continued, adopting a more conciliatory tone. "We don't want to create unnecessary problems. You are victims of a sick old man's delusion. Roberto Marquez spent the last years of his life obsessed with Elena, with the idea that she would come back to him. When she died, that obsession transferred to the two of you. So he really did leave the inheritance to us," I insisted. "A man with dementia left everything to 2 women he never met, based on his romantic fantasy about your mother. That's not a valid will. It's the delusion of a sick mind." His words made sense in a cruel way. If Roberto really suffered from Alzheimer's, if he had spent years fantasizing about our mother, but what if he was lucid when he wrote the will? Helena asked. Morrison's companion finally spoke again. "He wasn't. I should know. I was his caregiver." His caregiver, Thomas Reed. The man introduced himself. I took care of Mr. Marquez for the last 3 years of his life. I can testify that he rarely knew what day of the week it was, let alone was in a condition to make complex financial decisions. Then why would he make a will leaving everything to us? Because he believed Alina was still alive, Reed explained. He refused to accept that she had died. He said she would come back to him, that they would bring the girls to meet him. It was a tragic fantasy. I felt a pang of sympathy for the old man, falling in love with our mother as a young man, carrying that passion for decades, and then spending the last years of his life waiting for a reconciliation that could never happen. But you still haven't explained how we got here, I said. If you didn't send the key. Roberto had a private lawyer, Morrison explained. Someone who fueled his delusions in exchange for generous. We suspect he followed Roberto's instructions even after his death. Where is this lawyer now? Missing. Along with a considerable amount of Roberto's money, the story was becoming more complex and darker with each moment. Our mother, Roberto, the missing lawyer, the questionable Willett, was like trying to put a puzzle together in a storm. What exactly do you want from us? I asked. Morrison pulled out another document. We want you to sign this, a formal waiver of any claim to the Marquez estate. In exchange, you would be free to leave without further trouble. And if we don't sign, then we will have to take legal action. Trespassing, illegal removal of property, maybe even criminal charges, depending on what you found here, Reed added. And consider that you are completely isolated. The main road is blocked by snow. It could be days before anyone can get to you. The implicit threat was clear. We were alone, isolated, completely at the mercy of these two men. We need time to think, Helena said. Of course, Morrison agreed. You can have until tomorrow morning, but understand that our patience has limits. The two men got up to. At the door, Morrison turned one last time. And, girls, if you've found something that belongs to the Marquez estate, we expect you to return. We wouldn't want to have to look for it. The door closed behind them, and we heard the SUV start and drive away. But Helena and I remained motionless for several minutes, processing what had just happened. They know, Helena whispered finally. Know what? About the safe. About the documents. They know we found something. She was right. The way they had spoken, the questions they asked, the threat about returning things that belonged to the estate, they knew exactly what we were looking for, and what we had found. Helena, I said slowly, what if they were lying? What if the will is real, and they're trying to trick us into giving up a legitimate inheritance? Or what if they're telling the truth and we're chasing a fantasy? Both possibilities were frightening for different reasons. If Morrison and Reed were lying, then we were victims of an elaborate robbery. If they were telling the truth, then we were pawns in a delusional game orchestrated by a dead man with Alzheimer's. We have to get out of here, I said. How? They said. The road is blocked. I went to the window and looked out. It was hard to see through the falling snow, but the road really did look impassable. And even if we could get through on foot, it was miles to the nearest town, and we didn't have the proper equipment for a hike in snow. So we're trapped, Helena murmured, for now. But that gives us time to figure out the truth. How? I pointed to the office. We have all those documents. Maybe there's something there that will tell us if Morrison and Reed are lying, or if Roberto's will is really valid. Helena nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. What if they come back? Then we'll have to be prepared. We spent the rest of the day meticulously examining all the documents we had found. There was much more than we had initially realized: correspondence between Roberto and various lawyers, medical reports, even personal diaries that revealed the depth of his obsession with our mother. In a diary entry from 2018, Roberto had written, "She will come. Alina always comes back to me. This time, I will bring the girls too. We need to be a family." He really believed she was still alive, I murmured. Or that she would somehow come back from the dead, Helena added darkly. But there were other documents that contradicted Morrison's story. Medical reports showing that, although Roberto had been diagnosed with early-onset dementia, he still had moments of mental clarity, and the will had been written during a period that the doctors described as improved cognition. "Look at this," Helena said, showing me a letter dated just 6 months before Roberto's death. The handwriting was clear and firm, and the content was coherent and logical. "That doesn't look like the writing of someone with advanced Alzheimer," I admitted. "And look at the date on the will again. It was written during the same period as this letter." It was starting to look like Morrison and Reed had lied about Roberto's mental condition, at least to some extent. Maybe the will was valid after all. But then we found something that changed everything. Correspondence between Roberto and a Denver lawyer, discussing a plan to bring Alina back. The lawyer had suggested that if Roberto couldn't locate Alina directly, he could try to lure her daughters to the property. My God, I whispered, reading the letter with growing horror. They planned this. Roberto and the lawyer planned to bring us here. The letter detailed the scheme. The lawyer would create a fictional office, send a mysterious letter mentioning an inheritance, and then provide us with access to the property. All so Roberto could, somehow, reconnect with our mother through us. But Roberto died 3 years ago, Helena said. How did the plan still work? We kept reading. There were detailed instructions for the plan to be executed even after Roberto's death. The lawyer was to wait a few years, then implement the scheme exactly as it had been discussed. The lawyer's name, Helena said, pointing to the signature on the letter. James Morrison. Morrison. Like David Morrison, the man who was here. Brothers, maybe. Or did James change his name? It didn't matter. What mattered was that the entire scheme had been orchestrated by someone who was still alive. Someone who had an interest in bringing us to the property. But why? If Roberto was dead, what was the purpose? The answer came in the form of a life insurance policy we found at the bottom of the pile. Roberto had taken out a $5 million life insurance policy with a very specific clause. The beneficiary would be any direct descendant of Alina Marquez, who claims the Marquez property within 5 years of the insured's death. $5 million, I murmured. Helena, if we claim the inheritance, we get $5 million in life insurance, and if we don't claim it, I read the next. Then the money goes to ... Oh, what? To the legal office that administered James Morrison's office. Now, it all made sense. Morrison didn't want to stop us from claiming the inheritance to protect someone else's interest. He wanted to stop us so he could get the life insurance. So he's trying to trick us into giving up $5 million? Helena said. Worse than that. If we die before claiming the inheritance, the money automatically goes to him. A chill ran down my spine as I understood the full implication. Morrison wasn't just trying to trick us. If that didn't work, he might decide we were a permanent obstacle to his plans. Helena, I think we're in real danger. She must have reached the same conclusion because her face turned pale. They know we're isolated. They know no one will come looking for us for days. We have to get out now. How? The road is blocked. It's getting dark. And we don't have equipment for a hike in the snow. She was right, but staying wasn't an option either. If Morrison decided we couldn't be convinced to give up the inheritance, is there a phone in the house? I asked. Internet. Any way to call for help? Helena shook her head. I checked yesterday. No cell signal, no landline, no internet. We're completely isolated. It was then that we heard the sound of an engine approaching it. My heart pounded. They're back, Helena whispered. We ran to the window. It was the same black SUV, slowly approaching the house, but this time they didn't stop at the main entrance. Instead, they drove around the house and stopped in the back, where they wouldn't be seen from the road. They don't want to be seen, I realized. Helena, this isn't a social visit. What do we do? My mind raced through the options. We could try to hide, but the house wasn't big enough for that to work for long. We could try to escape on foot, but it would be a death sentence in the cold and snow without proper equipment. Grab the safe and all the important documents, I said quickly. Let's go to the attic. The attic. It's the hardest place to find, and it has those skylight windows. If we need to, maybe we can break one of them and get onto the roof. We worked quickly, gathering everything that could prove our right to the inheritance. Helena stuffed the safe and the most important documents into her suit, while I grabbed a flashlight and anything that could serve as an improvised weapon. We went up to the attic, just as we heard the back door opening. They either had a key or had broken down the door. The attic was cold and dark, lit only by the faint light filtering through the skylight windows. We hid behind the bookshelves, trying to control our breathing as we listened to the footsteps downstairs. They're not here, I heard Morrison say. The cars are still outside, Reed replied. They have to be somewhere. Check every room and see if you can find those documents. The footsteps spread throughout the house.
Since you've been here with me all this time, it means you enjoy our story. So, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. Give this one a like, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from.
Doors opening and closing, drawers being rummaged through, furniture being moved. They weren't just looking for ASA. They were looking for the evidence we had discovered. Helena, I whispered softly, we have to get out of this house. How? I pointed to one of the skylight windows. We get on the roof, go down the side of the house where they can't see us, and then what? We walk in the snow until we die of hypothermia? It's better than the alternative. The footsteps were coming up the stairs now. First to the second floor, then, inevitably, to the attic. They were in the office. I heard Morrison yell from downstairs. The secret compartment is open. Did you find anything? Reed yelled back. The main documents are gone. They have the evidence. That sealed our fate. Now Morrison knew we knew about the life insurance, about his scheme. He couldn't let us live. I heard footsteps on the stairs leading to the attic. Now, I whispered to him. We ran to the nearest skylight window. It was heavy and stuck, but we managed to force it open. The cold wind and snow immediately rushed into the attic. Are you up there? Morrison's voice echoed from the stairs. Helena climbed out first, scrambling through the opening onto the snow-covered roof. I followed her, pulling the suitcase behind me. The roof was treacherous, sloped, and slippery. The snow was falling more heavily now, reducing our visibility to just a few feet. But at least we were out of the house. This way, I whispered, pointing to a section where the roof came closest to the ground. We moved carefully, testing each step. Behind us, I heard Morrison and Reed reaching the attic, their voices echoing through the open window. They went out on the roof. Reed yelled, "Idiots!" Morrison muttered. "They'll freeze to death out there." Maybe he was right, but at least we'd have a chance. Inside the house, we had none. We reached the edge of the roof. It was about a 10-foot drop to the ground, but there was a snowdrift below that could cushion our fall. "You first," I said to Helena. She hesitated for only a moment, then let herself drop. She landed heavily in the snow, but immediately got up. "I'm okay," she whispered up. I tossed the suitcase to her, then jumped myself. The impact knocked the wind out of me, but didn't seriously hurt me. "Where now?" Helena asked, shivering from the cold. I looked around. The forest stretched in every direction, a white maze of trees, but there was a trail, almost covered by the new snow, that led away from the house. "That way," I pointed. "It should lead to the main road." We started walking, fighting through the deep snow and the cutting wind. Behind us, I could hear Morrison and Reed coming out of the house, their voices lost in the wind. "They're going to follow us," Helena said. "Then we have to move fast." But we were amateurs at snow survival, and they likely had proper gear. Our time was running out fast. That's when we saw the light through the tree. A small, yellow light, like from an illuminated window. "There's another house," I whispered. "Or it's a trap." Maybe it was, but we had no choice. We walked toward the light, hoping to find salvation, but prepared to face more danger. The light came from a small cabin, much more modest than the house we had left. Smoke rose from its chimney, and an old car was parked outside. "Someone lives here," Helena said. I knocked on the door, my fists so cold I could barely feel the wood. After a moment that seemed like an eternity, the door opened. An elderly man stared at us, surprised to see two snow-covered women at his door in the middle of the night. "Please," I begged. "We need help. There are men trying to hurt us." The man studied us for a moment, then opened the door fully. "Come in," he said. "You'll freeze to death out there." We gratefully entered the heated cabin. It was simple but comfortable, with a crackling fireplace and the comforting smell of homemade soup. "I'm Henry Walsh." The man introduced himself. "I've lived here for 30 years. And you are?" "Clara and Helena Santos," I replied. "We were staying in the big house up there, but ... double quotes." "Ah," Henry nodded. "The old Marquez property. Should have guessed." "Did you know Roberto Marquez?" "Knew him well. Sad man, especially in his last years. Always talking about a woman he had lost a long time ago." Henry offered us blankets and hot chocolate as we told our story. He listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally when he recognized a detail. "Morrison," he said finally. "Yes, I know him. Dishonest lawyer who took advantage of old Roberto's mental state. I always suspected he was stealing money from the estate." "So the will is real?" Helena asked. "Oh, it's real," Henry confirmed. Roberto showed me a copy. He was very proud to have found Elena's daughters, even though she herself had died. But Morrison said Roberto had Alzheimer's, that he wasn't mentally competent, ... double quotes. Henry shook his head. Roberto had memory problems. It's true, but he still had moments of total clarity. And it was during one of those moments that he made the will. I even signed as a witness. I felt a wave of relief. The inheritance was really ours, but we still had Morrison to deal with. Is he dangerous? I asked. Morrison. I always thought he was just but if he's threatening, Henry frowned. You need to go to the police. There's no way to get out of here with the snow. There's a radio station in my basement. I can contact the state police. Ask them to send someone. It was more hope than we had had in hours. But as Henry went down to the basement to use the radio, we heard the sound of an engine approaching. They found us, Helena whispered. I looked out the window. The black SUV was parked outside, and Morrison and Red were getting out. But this time, they didn't seem interested in negotiating. Morrison had a gun in his Henry. I yelled down to the basement. They're here, and they have a gun. His voice echoed from below, tense but firm. The police are on their way. 20 minutes, an eternity when armed men were outside a fragile cabin in the middle of nowhere. They banged on the door, but this time it wasn't the polite knock of civilized visitors. It was the sound of heavy fists demanding entry. We know you're in there, Morrison yelled. Come out now or we're coming in. Helena and I exchanged a look. There was no way out the back. I could see through the kitchen window that Reed was covering the back of the cabin. What we want is simple, Morrison. Hand over all the documents you took from the house. Sign the waiver of rights, and you can leave. And if we don't, I yelled back, then this will end in a way neither of us wants. Henry came up from the basement, holding an old rifle. It's my hunting shotgun, he whispered. It's not much, but it might give us an edge. The front door burst open with a bang. Morrison had kicked it in, breaking the simple lock. He entered with his gun raised, Red right behind him. All right, Morrison said, surveying the scene. An old man with a hunting shotgun and 2 scared women. This doesn't have to get complicated. The police are coming, Henry said firmly. Morrison laughed. The police? In this weather, they won't get here before dawn. And by then, this situation will have already been resolved. What do you really want? I asked, trying to buy time. I already told you, the documents and the waiver. And then you kill us anyway. Morrison sighed, as if he were dealing with a stubborn child. Look, this isn't an action. I'm not a psychopathic killer. I'm just a business trying to protect his. Your interests include $5 million that don't belong to you. $5 million that Roberto Marquez promised me as payment for years of legal services. His will may have mentioned, but there were verbal agreements that preceded that document. Verbal agreements with a man you said had dementia. Morrison narrowed his eyes. Roberto had moments of clarity. During one of those moments, he assured me I would be properly compensated. It was a weak justification, and he knew it. But desperate men cling to any justification, no matter how flimsy. Even if that were true, Helena said, it doesn't give you the right to threaten us. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm making a business offer. With guns pointed at us, necessary precaution. You fled the house. You refused to cooperate. ... Because we found out you're a thief? Morrison's face darkened. Watch your words, Miss Sam. My patience has limits. It was then that Henry moved. In a surprisingly agile move for his age, he raised the shotgun and aimed it at Morrison. Get out of my house, he said in a firm voice. Now? Morrison turned his gun on Henry. Old man, put that down before someone gets hurt. The only person who's going to get hurt here is you, if you don't leave immediately. The tension in the air was palpable. 2 armed men facing each other, with Helena and I trapped in the middle. Reed, Morrison said quietly, without taking his eyes off Henry, get the suitcase with the document. Reed moved toward the suitcase Helena had dropped near the door. But as he bent down to pick it up, Helena did something unexpected. She kicked the suitcase hard, making it slide across the floor, away from Reed's reach. Idiot! Reed yelled, turning to Helena in anger. It was the moment of distraction Henry needed. He fired the shotgun into the ceiling, the deafening sound echoing through the small cabin. The next one won't be into the ceiling, he warned. Morrison hesitated. He could shoot Henry, but then he would be in an isolated cabin with 2 bodies and no good explanation for the police, who were on their way. It's over, Henry said. Put the gun down. For a moment, I thought Morrison was going to surrender, but then he tightened his grip on the gun and turned to me. If I can't have the money, he said in a strangely calm voice, at least I can make sure you don't have it either. Everything happened in slow motion. Morrison raising the gun, Henry swinging his shotgun around, Reed yelling no, Helena throwing herself in front of me. The shot echoed through the cabin, mixing with the sound of the approaching siren. Helena cried out and fell, blood staining her shirt. Henry fired his shotgun, hitting Morrison in the shoulder and causing him to fall. Reed immediately kicked Morrison's gun away, his hands raised in surrender. "Helena!" I screamed, kneeling beside my sister. The wound was in her arm, bleeding heavily but not looking fatal. "I'm okay," she whispered, "or I will be." The sirens were very close now. Red and blue lights began to flash through the cabin windows. "It's over," Henry said, still pointing his shotgun at Morrison, who was groaning on the floor, holding his wounded shoulder. Morrison looked at me with eyes full of pain and rage. "You have no idea what you've just done," he muttered. "You have no idea about the secrets Roberto kept, about what your mother really did. What are you talking about?" But before he could answer, the cabin door burst open and state police officers entered, guns drawn, yelling orders for everyone to get on the floor. It was the end, but I also knew Morrison was right about one thing. There were more secrets to uncover, and now that we had survived the first part of the truth, we would need the courage to face the rest of our family story. And as I lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the house around me, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a terrible mistake in trusting my sister. The next morning, I woke up feeling as if I had slept little and poorly. Helena was already in the kitchen again, but this time her demeanor was different. She seemed agitated, almost feverish in her energy. "Good morning," I greeted cautiously. "Clara, I need to show you something," she said without preamble. "I found something last night." So she had continued her exploration after I went up. "What? Come with me." We went to the main bedroom, where Helena led me to a seemingly ordinary wall panel next to the window. She pressed her hands against the wood, and to my surprise, a section moved slightly. "Look," she said, pushing harder. The panel opened like a small door, revealing a hidden space behind the wall. "My God," I whispered. "How did you discover that?" "I was examining the wall last night and noticed this section sounded different when I tapped on it, more hollow." Helena took a flashlight that was on the bedside table. "And it's not just an empty space. There's something inside." She shined the light into the small compartment, and I could see there was a metallic object at the bottom. Helena reached in and pulled out what appeared to be a small, antique safe, about the size of a shoebox. "It was just sitting there," she explained, placing the safe on the bed, as if someone had hidden it a long time ago. The safe was heavy, made of dark metal that had the patina of age. There were ornate details engraved on the lid, and an old latch that looked functional, although there was no visible lock. "Should we open it?" I asked. Although I already knew what Helena's answer would be, she was already manipulating the latch. "Of course we should. It could be something important. Or it could be something that's none of our business," I argued. "Helena, we're in someone else's house. We can't just snoop around and open things we find. But what if it's something dangerous? What if the owner hid it here for a good reason?" It was a weak justification, and we both knew it. But I could see that Helena was determined, and, if I was honest with myself, I was curious. The latch opened with a metallic click that echoed in the silence of the room. Helena lifted the lid slowly, as if she expected something to jump out. The inside of the safe was lined with faded red velvet. There were two main objects: an antique locket, hanging on a heavy silver chain, and a black and white photograph. Helena picked up the locket first, holding it to the light. It was elaborately worked, with inscriptions that were almost illegible due to age. I could make out a few letters, but they seemed to be in a foreign language, perhaps Latin. "It's beautiful," Helena murmured, turning the locket to examine every angle. "And it looks very old. It's probably worth a small fortune." But it was the photograph that really caught my attention. It was a formal photo of a woman, the kind that was common at the beginning of the last century. The woman was dressed in the fashion of the time, with a dark, high-collared dress and hair styled in an elaborate bun. But it wasn't the clothes or the hairstyle that took my breath away. It was the woman's face. "Helena," I whispered, picking up the photo with trembling hands. "Look at this." She leaned over my shoulder to get a better look. "What about it? ... Oh my God." The woman in the photograph was identical to our mother. Not just similar, not just a locket, was as if our mother had posed for that photo. Every detail of the face, from the jawline to the shape of the eyes, was exactly the same. "That's impossible," I murmured. "This photo must be at least 70 or 80 years old." Helena took the photo from my hand, studying it intensely. "Maybe it's her grandmother, or a great-aunt. Sometimes family resemblance can be striking, but I knew that wasn't it." We had seen photos of our maternal grandparents, and none of them looked remotely like our mother or the woman in the photograph. "Helena, did you know this was here?" I asked suddenly. "What? Of course not. How would I know? It's just that you seem very determined to explore this house, and now we've found a photo of someone who's identical to our mother. Are you suggesting that I knew about this before we came?" I'm asking. Helena stared at me for a long moment. "Clara, I swear I have never seen this photo before in my life." Finding the safe was pure luck, or curiosity, or whatever you want to call it. I wanted to believe her, but there was something about the whole situation that felt like more than mere coincidence. How had she gotten this cabin exactly? Who was the mysterious client who had lent it to her? And why had our exploration so quickly led to the discovery of something so intimately linked to our family? "There's something else," Helena said, picking up the photo again. "Look on the back." I turned the photograph over and found an inscription in faded ink: Elena Marquez, 1923. Elena, I repeated, almost like Helena. And Marquez, wasn't that Mom's maiden name? My heart began to beat faster. Our mother was born Elena Marquez before she married our father and became Elena Santos. But she had always told us she had no family, that her parents had died when she was very young, and that there were no living relatives. "That doesn't make sense," I said. "Mom always said she was an only child, that there was no family history to tell." "Maybe she was lying," Helena suggested quietly. The possibility that our mother had lied to us about something as fundamental as our family history was unsettling. Elena Santos had been a reserved woman, but I had always thought her reticence about the past was simply pain, not deliberate dishonest. "We need to find out more about this house," Helena said, carefully putting the locket and the photograph back in the safe. "About who owned it, about how our family might be connected." "How do you suggest we do that?" "We don't have internet here." "There's a library in town," Helena interrupted. "I remember seeing it when we drove through yesterday. They probably have local records, old newspapers." "Helena, it's snowing outside. And even if we can get to town, what are we going to say? That we broke into a house and found mysterious photos?" "We didn't break in. We have permission to be here." "From whom exactly?" Helena hesitated. From the current owner." "And who is that?" I'm not sure of the exact name. It was all arranged through intermediaries." Each of Helena's answers only raised more questions. It was becoming increasingly clear that she knew more about our situation than she was letting on, and my patience was wearing thin. "Helena, stop lying to me now." She pulled away, holding the safe against her chest as if to protect it from me. "I'm not lying. I just don't know all the details." "Then tell me the details you do know." For a long moment, she was silent. I could see the conflict on her face, the battle between the desire to trust me and whatever secret she... "I received a letter," she said finally, "about a month ago. A letter from a law office saying our mother had left something for us. Something that was kept on this property. Mom died 5 years ago." "Helena, why are you only telling me this now?" "Because the letter said we could only get access if we came together. Both of us, and you and I... Well, we weren't exactly speaking. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal. "So, you lied to get me here. All that talk about reconciliation, about being a family again." "It wasn't a lie," Helena interrupted. "I really do want us to be close again. But yes, there was another reason." "What other reason, Helena? What else are you not telling me?" She put the safe on the bed and sat down heavily in the chair next to the window. "The letter said our mother had left documents about our true inheritance. Our inheritance. But we already split everything after the funeral. Not that inheritance, Clara. Something else. Something she hid from us our entire lives." I felt dizzy. "And you thought it would be a good idea to bring me here based on a mysterious letter from people you don't know?" "The law office is real. I checked, and they had information about our family that only someone legitimately connected to it could have." "What kind of information?" Helena hesitated again. "They knew about the scar on your knee you got when you fell off your bike at 7. They knew I was allergic to. They knew about the time Mom took us on that surprise trip to Barcelona when I was 15. Intimate, deep family memories that no stranger could have known. If the law office really had access to that information, then they definitely had a real connection to our family. Why didn't you just tell me all this from the beginning? Because you would have refused to come. You would have insisted on investigating first, on asking questions, on making everything complicated. And then we never would have discovered, Discovered what? A safe with an old photo. Helena, this could just be a coincidence. Do you really believe that? No, I didn't believe it. The resemblance between the woman in the photograph and our mother was too perfect, too specific, to be a mere coincidence. And there was something about the whole situation that felt orchestrated, as if someone wanted us to find exactly what we had found. Show me the letter, I asked. Helena went to her suitcase and pulled out a yellowed envelope. The letter was on official letterhead from Morrison and Associates Law Office, with a Denver address. The text was formal but vague, mentioning items of family interest and the need for both beneficiaries to be present for legal access. Did you try to contact this office after you received the letter? I tried. The number no longer exists. And when I looked up the address online, I found that the building was demolished 2 years ago. A chill ran down my spine. Helena, that doesn't make sense. If the office no longer exists, who gave us access to this property? I don't know. The keys were in an envelope I found under my door the morning I left to come get you. Under your door? Helena, do you realize how insane that sounds? She stood up abruptly. Insane or not, we're here. We found something. And whoever arranged this, they wanted us to find it. Or they wanted to lure us into a trap. A trap. Clara, you're being paranoid. Paranoid. Helena, someone we can't identify brought us to an isolated house using intimate personal information about our family. We found evidence that our mother lied to us about our family history. And you think I'm being paranoid? Helena picked up the safe again, holding it defensively. Maybe we should keep looking. If there's one hidden safe, there might be others. Or maybe we should leave. Now. We can't leave, Helena said quickly. Not yet. Why not? Because, Because I need to know the truth. About our mother, about our family, about why she kept secrets from. There was something desperate in her voice that made me pause. During all the years we hadn't spoken, I had assumed that Helena was fine, that she had moved on after our mother's death more easily than I had. But looking at her now, I could see that she was carrying her own baggage of pain and confusion. Okay, I said finally, let's look more. But if we don't find anything by tomorrow, or if anything else strange happens, we're leaving. Deal, Helena nodded, but I could see the relief in her eyes. Deal. We spent the rest of the morning systematically examining every room in the house. Helena had become methodical in her search, tapping on walls, looking for loose panels, checking behind furniture. I followed her, half reluctant, part of me still wanting to run away from the whole situation. It was in the office that we made the next discovery. Helena was examining the bookshelf behind the desk when she noticed that one of the volumes stuck out slightly more than the others. Clara, come here. When she pulled the book, it didn't come off the shelf. Instead, there was a mechanical click, and an entire section of the bookshelf rotated inward, revealing another hidden compartment. My God, I whispered. How many secrets does this house have? This space was larger than the first, almost like a small closet, and it was filled with paper, documents, photographs, and newspaper clippings, all organized in careful piles. Helena picked up the nearest pile and began to flip through. They're all about our mother, she said with a voice full of astonishment. Look, there were photographs of our mother at different ages, some I had never seen before, documents with the name Alina Marquez, and newspaper clippings with headlines that made my blood run cold. Missing heiress, Marquez family, mystery, abandoned fortune. Helena, I said in a choked voice, I think our mother wasn't who we thought she was. We took all the documents and spread them out on the office desk. It was like putting together a puzzle of our mother's secret life, piece by piece, revealing a story she had never told us. The oldest newspapers were from 1955, when our mother would have been about 20 years old. The headlines told the story of a wealthy family that had mysteriously lost. The Marquez family owned a prosperous mining company with properties all over Colorado and beyond. Look at this one, Helena said, showing me a yellowed clipping. Elena Marquez Sol, heiress of the Marquez fortune, disappeared after family offers reward for information. A photo accompanied the article. It was our mother, young and beautiful, but with a worried expression that I had never seen on her during our childhood. I murmured. About what? We kept reading. Apparently, Elena Marquez had been involved in a legal battle with her father's brother over the inheritance. When the family patriarch died, he left everything to Elena, instead of splitting it between her and her uncle, as was expected. The uncle contested the will, claiming that Elena was illegitimate. She had to run away, Helena said slowly. Run away from her own family to protect her inheritance. But if she inherited everything, where is the money? Mom was never rich. We grew up in a middle-class house. She worked as a teacher. Maybe she hid the money. Or maybe she lost the legal battle. There were more articles, spread over several years. Marquez heiress, still missing. Marquez fortune in legal dispute. Family seeks Elena Marquez for 5 years. And then, abruptly, the articles stopped. The last one was from suggesting that the family had given up the search, or that the case had been resolved somehow. 1961, I said. That was the year she married Dad. Helena nodded. She took on a new identity, a new life. Elena Marquez became Elena Santos. But there was something else in the documents that deeply disturbed me. Photographs of our mother with men I didn't recognize, in places that seemed much more luxurious than anything she had ever shown us during our childhood. One photo in particular caught my attention. Our mother, young and elegant, was arm in arm with an older man in front of a large house. A house that looked very familiar. Helena, I said in a trembling voice, this house in the photo, ... She looked over my shoulder. It's this house, isn't it? This cabin? It was exactly this house. But in the photograph it looked new, well kept, surrounded by lush gardens. On the back, someone had written, Elena and Roberto, summer of 1954. Roberto, I repeated. Who was Roberto? Helena flipped through more papers until she found a legal document. Roberto Marquez, she read, brother of Vicente Marquez. Vicente was her father, so Roberto was her uncle, the uncle who contested the inheritance. But in this photo, they look ... close, intimate. There was something deeply unsettling about the photo. Our mother looked happy, relaxed, nothing like the worried woman from the newspaper article. And the man, Roberto, had his hand on her waist in a way that suggested more than a family relationship. I think I understand now why she ran away, Helena said quietly. What? The dispute wasn't just about money. It was about her and Roberto. Look at the dates she was with him in 1950. But the articles about her disappearance start in 1955. Something happened between them. It was a disturbing theory, but it made sense. If our mother had been romantically involved with her uncle, and then the relationship had soured, especially if money and inheritance were involved, so this house belonged to him, I asked. It seemed so. And now, ... Helena didn't finish the sentence, but we were both thinking the same thing. If this house had belonged to Roberto Marquez, and if our mother had fled a dispute with him, then who had brought us here, and why? We continued to examine the document. There were contracts, deeds, photographs of other properties. The Marquez family had been much richer than I had imagined. Mines, ranches, urban properties, small fortune that our mother had abandoned when she fled. Look at this, Helena said, showing me a recent legal document. It's a will. From Roberto Marquez, dated just 3 years ago. I read the document with growing astonishment. Roberto Marquez had died recently, and in the will, he left everything to Elena Marquez Santos and her daughters, Clara and Helena Santos. He left everything to, I whispered, to us and to Mom. But Mom died 5 years ago. So technically, ... Technically, everything passed. I felt dizzy. Helena, does that mean we're rich? That we inherited the entire Marquez fortune? It seems so. But there's a clause here. Helena pointed to a section of the will. It says we can only take possession if both of us were present to claim the inheritance. Together? That's why someone wanted us to come together. But who? Roberto is dead. Who else would know about this? It was then that we heard the sound. An engine approaching on the access road. Helena and I exchanged a look, panic evident on our faces. Were you expecting anyone? I asked. No. Were you? We ran to the front window. A black SUV was slowly climbing the road, approaching the house. Through the windshield, I could see the silhouette of at least two. What do we do? Helena whispered. Hide everything, I replied quickly. All the documents, the safe, everything. Now. We worked feverishly, gathering all the papers and putting them back in the hidden compartment. Helena put the original safe in her suitcase, and I made sure the bookshelf panel was properly closed. The engine stopped outside. Car doors opened and closed. Footsteps in the snow, approaching the front door. What do we say to them? Helena whispered. That we're tourists. That we rented the house. Anything but the truth. The knock on the door echoed through the house, firm and authoritative. My heart was beating so hard I was sure whoever was on the other side could hear it. Helena and I exchanged one last look, and then she went to open the door. Outside were two middle-aged men, one tall and thin, the other shorter and stockier. Both wore expensive coats and had the appearance of business, but there was something in their eyes that made me immediately uncomfortable. Miss Santos, the taller man said, my name is David Morrison. I think you received our letter. Morrison, the same name as the law office that had supposedly been demolished. Helena and I exchanged a quick look. You can come in, Helena said, her voice surprisingly steady. It's very cold out there. The men came in, taking off their coats and examining the house with experienced eyes. There was something in their posture that suggested familiarity with the place. A beautiful house, Morrison commented. I hope you have found comfortable accommodation. Yes, I replied carefully. Very comfortable. Thank you for arranging. The other man, who had not yet introduced himself, was examining the living room with particular interest. His eyes lingered on the fireplace, the bookshelves, the decor, as if he were looking for something specific. I assume you've started exploring? Morrison asked casually. A little, Helena replied. It's a fascinating house. And have you found anything of interest? The question was asked casually, but I could feel the weight behind it. These men knew exactly why we were here, and what they expected us to find. What do you mean? I asked, trying to sound innocent. Morrison smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. Well, I assume you've discovered something about your mother, about the true story of Alina Marquez. The game was over. They knew that we knew. What do you want? Helena asked directly. We want what is ours by right, the other man replied, speaking for the first time. And we want you to give up any claim to the Marquez inheritance. I felt my stomach. These were not lawyers trying to help us. They were people who wanted to stop us from claiming our inheritance. And if we refused? I asked. Morrison and his companion exchanged a look, and the smile disappeared from his face. Then this will become much more complicated for you both. The cold sliced across my face like invisible blades as we trudged up the winding road. The crisp snow crunched under our feet, creating a monotonous soundtrack that only intensified the awkward silence between Helena and It had been 5 years since we'd last seen each other in person. 5 years since Mom's when a bitter argument over the inheritance had nearly destroyed our already fragile relationship for good. Now, walking side by side on this white-covered road, I wondered if accepting her invitation had been a good idea. The family therapy my psychologist so highly recommended seemed like a distant fantasy when we faced the raw reality of being together. Every attempt at conversation died before it could even begin, suffocated by the weight of unresolved hurts and wounded pride. It's further than I remember, I murmured, more to break the silence than for any real need for communication. Helena just nodded, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. She had always been this, even when we were kids. Determined, stubborn, unable to admit when she was wrong or when she needed help. I, on the other hand, had always been the one to give in first, the one who tried to keep the family peace, even when it meant swallowing my own need. The wind picked up, making the tree branches emit a ghostly moan. The sky, already dark, despite it being only mid-afternoon, promised more snow. A part of me was beginning to question the wisdom of coming to such an isolated place, especially with someone I could barely hold a civil conversation with. There it is, Helena said finally, pointing ahead, and then I saw it. The cabin stood majestic on top of a small rise, its illuminated windows creating golden rectangles against the dark backdrop of the forest. It was much larger than I had imagined, more of a luxurious country home than the rustic wooden cabin I had in mind. The architecture combined traditional elements with modern touches. And even from a distance, I could tell the quality of the materials and the care for detail. How did you get this place? I asked, genuinely curious. Work contacts, Helena replied evasively. A client who wasn't using it and offered it for a symbolic price. There was something about her tone that bothered me, but I decided not to press it. We had enough problems to solve without creating new reasons to argue. Besides, regardless of how she had gotten the cabin, the place seemed perfect for our attempt at reconciliation. Isolated enough that we would be forced to talk, comfortable enough that we could do so in civilized conditions. When we finally reached the front door, Helena took an old key from her pocket. The lock turned with a soft click, and the door opened to reveal an interior that took my breath away. The entrance hall was wide and welcoming, with a wrought iron chandelier hanging from the high exposed. The dark wood floor gleamed under the soft light, and colorful Persian rugs created islands of visual warmth. My God, I whispered, letting my suitcase drop to the floor. This is incredible. For the first time in hours, I saw Helena smile genuinely. I knew you'd like it. Remember when we were little and we'd spend hours flipping through Mom's decorating magazines? The unexpected mention of our mother created a moment of tension, but this time it was different. Instead of the sharp pain and anger that usually accompanied any reference to her, I felt only a soft, almost nostalgic melancholy. I remember, I admitted. You always said you'd have a house exactly like the ones in the magazine someday. And you always said you preferred a small apartment in the city center, Helena replied, her voice carrying a tone of genuine recollection. For a moment, we were just two sisters sharing a childhood memory. But the moment passed quickly, and we returned to the familiar territory of mutual discussion. The cabin's interior was even more impressive than the entryway suggested. The main living room had a stone fireplace that dominated an entire wall, flanked by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Dark brown leather sofas were grouped around a massive solid wood coffee table, and large windows offered panoramic views of the snow-covered forest. The kitchen was a chef's dream, with stainless steel appliances, granite countertops, and a central island that could easily accommodate an entire family. Helena opened the refrigerator and smiled with satisfaction. I had it stocked before we got here, she explained. We have enough food for a week. A week? The idea alarmed me. I thought we were only staying for the weekend. Well, you never know with the weather around here, Helena responded casually. It's better to be prepared. There was something in her answer that left me uneasy. But again, I decided not to. Maybe it was just my nervousness talking, or maybe it was the inherent strangeness of being in an unfamiliar place with someone who, despite being my sister, felt like a stranger in many ways. We went upstairs to choose our rooms. Helena immediately claimed the master bedroom, a spacious suite with a private bathroom and a balcony overlooking the mountain. I took the room next door, smaller but equally comfortable, decorated in shades of blue and white that reminded me of the room we had as teens. As I unpacked my suitcase, I heard Helena moving around in the room next door. She was always restless, unable to stay still for long. Even when we were kids, she was always exploring, messing with things she shouldn't, asking questions that adults preferred not to answer. When we went down for dinner, the tension between us had intensified again. We tried to talk about work, about the weather, about anything that didn't touch on the sensitive topics that separate. But it was like dancing around a black hole no matter how hard we tried to avoid it. The gravity of our unresolved problems kept pulling us in. You look good, Helena said finally, pouring herself more wine. You too, I replied, although I wasn't sure if that was true. Helena looked thinner than I remembered, and there was a tension in her movements that suggested stress or anxiety. How's work? Good, and yours? Good as well. And so it continued, a superficial conversation that carefully avoided any topic that might lead to more dangerous territory. We talked about the weather, the food, the beauty of the cabin. We didn't talk about Mom, about the fight that separated us, about the 5 years of virtual silence between us. After dinner, we sat in the living room with the rest of the bottle of wine. The fireplace crackled softly, creating dancing shadows on the walls. For moments, I could almost imagine we were just two sisters enjoying a relaxing retreat together. Do you remember the first time Mom brought us to a place like this? Helena asked suddenly. The question took me by surprise. We had carefully avoided any mention of our mother all night, and now Helena brought her into the conversation as if it were the most natural thing in the world. That cabin on the lake, I recalled. You must have been 8. I was 10. You were afraid of the dark and wanted to sleep with me, and you spent the whole night telling me ghost stories to scare me even more. Helena laughed, a genuine sound I hadn't heard in years. I was terrible, wasn't I? You were my younger sister, I replied. It was your job to be terrible. It was the first moment of true connection we had since we arrived, and we both seemed aware of it. But instead of bringing us closer, the shared memory only highlighted how distant we had become. The wine and the warmth of the fireplace were taking their toll, and I felt my eyes getting heavy. I think I'm going to go up, I announced, getting up from the sofa. Already, it's still early. It was a long day, and tomorrow we can, I don't know, maybe take a walk, talk more. Helena nodded, although I could see she wasn't ready to end the night. It had always been this way. Was always the first to get tired, the first to want to go home, the first to give up when things got difficult. Going up the stairs, I heard Helena moving around in the living room, probably adding more wood to the fireplace. The sound comforted me in a strange way. There was something reassuring about knowing she was there, even if our relationship was complicated. My room was cold, so I turned on the heater and quickly slipped under the covers. Through the thin wall, I could hear Helena moving around in her room. Water running, drawers opening and closing, footsteps on the wooden floor. I was almost falling asleep when I heard a strange sound coming from the room next door. A scratching or banging sound, as if something heavy had fallen. I lay still, listening, but the sound didn't repeat. It must just be Helena settling in, I thought. But even so, it took me a long time to fall asleep. And when I finally did, my dreams were filled with confused images of our childhood, of our mother, and of secrets buried in the snow. I woke up the next morning to the sound of Helena moving around in the kitchen. The smell of coffee and frying bacon wafted up the stairs, and for a moment I felt as if I had gone back to childhood, when we would wake up to the aromas of the elaborate breakfasts our mother would prepare on weekends. I went down in my bathrobe and slippers, finding Helena already dressed and seemingly energized. She had prepared a full breakfast: scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, fresh fruit, and a pot of coffee that smelled like paradise. "You're up early," I commented, pouring myself coffee. "I couldn't sleep much," Helena admitted. "This place is noisier than I expected. Strange noises all night." This alarmed me. I had heard noises too, but I had assumed they were from Helena settling in. If she had heard them too, what kind of noises? Helena shrugged. Probably just the wood adjusting to the cold. Old houses make a lot of noise. But I could see in her eyes that she wasn't entirely convinced by her own explanation. There was a tension in her posture that suggested she had been more disturbed by the noises than she let on. "So, what are we doing today?" I asked, trying to change the subject. "I thought we could explore a bit. This place is huge, and I bet there's a lot we haven't seen yet." Typical Helena, where I saw the need for caution and to focus on our relationship. She saw an adventure waiting to be discovered. It was a fundamental difference between us that had always caused friction. After breakfast, Helena insisted on giving me a complete tour of the property. There were more rooms than I had initially realized, including a luxurious office with shelves full of old books and a small, well-stocked bar. The basement had been converted into an impressive wine cellar with hundreds of bottles arranged on wooden racks. "Who did you say you got this place from?" I asked again as we examined the cellar. "A client," Helena replied quickly. "Someone who works in real estate. Said the place had been empty for months and the owner would be happy to have someone looking after it." There was something about her answer that didn't ring true, but before I could press it, Helena was already heading up the stairs, eager to continue the exploration. Upstairs, she showed me an attic that had been converted into an even larger library, with skylight windows that let in natural light even on the overcast day. It was a magical space, the kind of place where I could easily spend hours lost in a good book. "This is incredible," I murmured, running my fingers over the books on the shelves. "Look at these first editions." Helena didn't seem interested in the book collection. She was examining the walls, lightly tapping on different sections as if she were looking. "What are you doing?" "Just curious about the construction," she replied vaguely. Places like this always have secret compartments, hidden spaces. It was common back when it was built. And when was that? Early 20th century, I'd say. Maybe the 1920s or 1930s. How did she know that? I was starting to suspect that Helena knew much more about the cabin than she had initially admitted. But confronting her directly would only result in another argument, and I was trying to keep the peace between. We spent the rest of the morning exploring the snow-covered grounds. Even in winter, it was possible to see that they would be spectacular in spring and summer. There were stone paths winding between carefully planned flower beds, a small frozen ornamental pond, and a summer house that offered panoramic views of the surrounding mountain. "This place must cost a fortune," I comment. "Are you sure your client won't mind any damage?" "Relax, Clara. We're responsible adults. We're not going to break anything." But there was a restless energy in Helena that worried me. She seemed unable to calm down, to simply enjoy the beauty of the place. She was always looking for something, examining details, asking questions she didn't express out loud. We had lunch on the covered porch, despite the cold, just to have a change of scenery. The view was spectacular, but it was also isolated in a way that was starting to make me uncomfortable. We couldn't see other buildings, other people, other signs of civilization. We were completely alone in the world, at least temporarily. "Helena," I began carefully, "maybe we should talk about why we're really here." She paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. "We're here to spend time together, to try to fix our relationship. Are we? Because it seems to me you're more interested in exploring this place than in talking." A blush crept up her neck. "That's not true." "Then let's talk. For real. This time. About Mom. About the fight. About why we haven't spoken for 5 years. Helena put her fork down on the plate and looked out at the distant mountain. For a long moment, I thought she was finally going to open up, finally admit that there was more at stake than she had revealed. "Not today," she said finally. "I'm not ready yet." It was the same answer she had given at Mom's funeral, and again the following year when I tried to make amends. Always, "Not today." Always, "I'm not ready yet." I was beginning to wonder if she ever would be. The rest of the day passed in increasing tension. We tried to watch a movie in the living room, but neither of us could concentrate. We made dinner together, but the forced collaboration only highlighted how much of a stranger we had become to it. After dinner, Helena disappeared into the master bedroom, claiming she wanted to take a long bath. I was left alone in the living room, watching the flames in the fireplace and wondering if I had made a mistake in coming. The hours passed slowly. I heard Helena moving around upstairs, then water running, then silence. The wind had picked up, making the house moan and complain in ways that were starting to make me nervous. It was nearly midnight when I finally went up to my room. The hallway was dark, lit only by a small night light near the door to Helena's room was closed, and there was no light coming from underneath. I was getting ready for bed when I heard the sound. A soft knocking sound coming from the room next door, as if someone was lightly tapping on the wall. I stopped brushing my teeth and listened. Tap, tap, tap. A regular pattern, too deliberate to be just the wood adjusting. I opened my bedroom door and stepped into the hallway, pressing my ear against Helena's door. The sound stopped immediately. "Helena," I called softly. There was no answer. I tried the doorknob, but the door was locked. This was strange. Why would she lock the door when it was just the two of us in the house? I went back to my room, but I couldn't fall asleep. Every noise in the house seemed amplified in the darkness. The wind in the trees, the occasional creak of the wood, and soon, almost imperceptibly, the sound of footsteps in the hallway. I lay rigid, listening.
If this story kept you hooked until now, just imagine the next ones. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any. Give this one a like, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from right now.
The footsteps stopped in front of my door, and for a terrifying moment, I thought the doorknob was going to turn. But then the footsteps continued, going down the hallway and down the stairs. Helena couldn't sleep again, apparently, but why was she being so cautious, so silent in her movement? My curiosity finally overcame my caution. I got up and carefully opened the door, peeking into the hallway. It was empty, but I could see light coming from under the stairs. Helena was awake, moving around the house in the middle of the night. I went down the stairs slowly, avoiding the steps I had noticed made noise during the day. The living room was empty, but there was light coming from the hallway that led to the rooms on the main floor. I followed the light, my heart beating faster with every step. I found Helena in the office, using a small flashlight to examine the bookshelf. She was dressed as if she had never gone to sleep. "What are you doing?" I asked. She spun around, the flashlight illuminating my face and temporarily blinding me. Clara, you scared me. I scared you. You're rummaging through the house in the middle of the night? Helena lowered the flashlight, and in the soft light I could see that her face was flushed, as if she had been caught red-handed doing something she shouldn't be. I couldn't sleep, she explained. I thought I'd get a book to read. With a flashlight? Why didn't you turn on the lights? I didn't want to wake you. It was a lie, and we both knew it. There was something else going on, something Helena had been hiding from me since we arrived. Helena, what's really going on? Why did you bring me here? For a moment, she seemed to be internally debating whether she should tell me that. Her eyes darted nervously around the room, and I could see the conflict on her face. She began, then stopped. I really just wanted us to spend some time together. Another lie. But it was clear she wasn't ready for the truth. Whatever it was, I'm going back to bed, I announced. And I suggest, as I went up the stairs, I heard Helena turning off the flashlight and following behind. But when I reached my room and looked back, I saw that she had stopped at her bedroom door and was watching me with an expression I couldn't interpret. I locked my door that night. It was the first time I had done so, but something about Helena's behavior was making me uneasy. There were secrets here, layers of dishonesty that I was only beginning to perceive. And as I lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the house around me, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a terrible mistake in trusting my sister.